to the One on One podcast with your host, Juan Ayala.
Welcome back to another episode of the One on One podcast. I'm your host. As always, make sure to check out the show on social media or at www.tjojp.com. Make sure to get a copy of the Occultus Mundi, Homunculus Owner's Manual, comic books, all that good stuff. Shout out to the patrons. Shout out to the YouTube members. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to check out the channel, One on One. I'm also live every Tuesday night over on the One on One Media YouTube channel, as well as twitch.tv/one-on-one podcast, all that good stuff. Make sure to check out the mailing list, the email list, sign up for that to stay up to date with the show. And today we have returning guest, at least more than 5 times now, Emily. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, Juan. Always a pleasure to spend a few hours with you, my friend.
Yes. And before we get into it, Emily, where can people find you and your work, your channel, all that?
You're
good
so
stuff?
good about all this stuff. You say all your things before you get started. Like, I always forget to do all of mine. My YouTube channel is my name, Emily Moyer. I put some stuff there, like I do my live streams with Danny and with Robert Phoenix there, and I post occasional episodes if I feel like they're sort of suited for that, of Strange Mosaic and some other things there. But I'm also on patreon.com/offplanetmedia, emilymoyer.locals.com, and rockfin.com/Emily Moyer. In 2025, I will be embarking on a new project, and as part of that, I will also probably be on Odyssey as well. I think hopefully, if this goes in any way that I'm hoping, this will be my great work, and then we'll see where we are. My website is also emilycmoyer.com. If you are interested in the weird I talk about or the weird stories I tell, I offer storytelling sessions, and I'm also a nutrition consultant. And if you need help getting that in order, I can help you with that too. All right. Now that we've got all out of the way, we're ready to go.
Now that we have all the business out of the way, the mumbo jumbo, what'd you think? You if you want to start with Caddo Lake, I made you watch a movie. Now I owe you one. I know that we got a comment on one of the last videos that I posted from an episode we did a while back where you mentioned the IO or AO, whatever that the name of that show is, and they're like, Emily's brought it up for the 5th time or something like that, and Juan still hasn't watched the show. So I gotta do you a solid because you did watch the movie, and that movie, I did do a Patreon episode where we broke down the movie. I was with Ryder Lee. We broke down the entire movie and talked about it, the lore behind the lake. And I think that it really fit into a lot of the crevices and things that we talk about. And it answered a bunch of questions for me. So what'd you think about it, Emily?
So I watched it that night. So I did you hard solid it. And I not only did I watch it, I took away any concerns that I would say I did, but didn't really, or anything like that. We watched it that night and we really liked it. Like Laura, sometimes I think when you hear M. Night Shyamalan or whatever, you kind of think it's going to be like
Ding Dong, yeah.
Yeah, Shyamalan Ding Dong. That it might be horror, it might be like disturbing, weird, and whatever. But this was definitely not. So sure, this is perfect for you and I to talk about. And like in some weird way, we'll see if by the end of this episode I can thread this needle. It's also connected to the Imaginal Theater on some level. And I'll see if I can. It just dawned on me today on some level when I was listening to you with your wine rant on the Imaginal Theater.
Was it bad?
No, it was great. It's fun to do it like that sometimes. Next time you're like drinking and driving, call me or let me know, and I'll come on, and you can drink wine and wander, and I'll drink bourbon or mezcal, and we can.
I'm not going to do it driving, but
I'm just joking. They're driving the one-on-one bus, right?
It was. Yeah, I felt like that was actually I did that video in 2 takes. So at one point in the middle of the video, it's a whole nother day of the week because I
That's
was
where
like,
I had to stop. I had to stop there because I had so many. This is what happens. The problem for me when I talk to someone like you, or someone like Thomas, or whatever, is every sentence you say leads to an hour worth of contemplation for me about something. So, like, if I watch too much, then I get confused and I can't keep my thoughts straight, right? Yeah. So, but I think I see some level of through line that we can sort of get to. So, okay, so Caddo Lake. Until like a few weeks ago, I'd never heard of it, right? You mentioned it to me when you were on my show, by the way, and we'll discuss all of that after the public portion is going to go public tonight. My patrons have already had it. But we talked about Caddo Lake. I'd never heard of Caddo Lake before, even though I live in Texas and I've been living here on and off for more than 20 years. I'd never heard of it, which I think is pretty interesting. And we already, just from what you were telling me and from me looking at it on the map and watching the little trailer, we were already starting to pluck at some pretty relevant topics and ideas. But what I found the most, sort of interesting or useful or whatever it is that what that movie displayed in terms of like the process that seemed to be happening, that's actually exactly what I think is going on here in Austin on Lady Bird Lake. Right? And so this is something now, is it possible that you hear about the murder, the serial killer, the Lady Bird Lake serial killer, or you hear people wondering if it's the smiley face killer? There's a variety of different theories and documentaries and things about this on YouTube. But I will tell you this, that one's pretty popular that you just passed. I've watched that one. I've watched a lot of these. All of them, and there's some like people from the alternative media who've proposed ideas. All of them are only considering things from one perspective. And I'd say most of them are not, their perspective is not wrong. It's just one of many things that are going on, right? And this show would basically, the Caddo Lake sort of set up a framework for how something like this would work, in which all kinds of theories could be simultaneously true without offending each other, other than the egos of the person who thinks that their narrative is the only right one.
When I saw this poster, I said, Lady Bird, this looks like an A24 film. As soon as I scroll down, boom, A24.
I've not seen this.
What is this about? So is a solo director debut, Greta Gerwig, and on various Mumblecore films. What is Mumblecore? What is that?
I don't know, but it's set in Sacramento, which is where my mom is from, and I was just in Sacramento a few weeks ago.
Theatrically, all right, so the plot is senior Immaculate Heart of Mary Catholic High School. Despite her family's finances, she longs to attend prestigious blah, blah, blah.
Right.
During a ride. Okay. All right. I don't know. It doesn't seem that interesting.
Doesn't seem that interesting. I'll look at it closely later when we're not on we're not recording. But so you have a scenario where you have like a very small town that is on one part of a lake. You have some very interesting trees that are sort of in the water. You have a dam, and then you have this sort of mystery that sort of creates a strange loop regarding a certain family in this town, right? And the resolution to the story basically comes at the exact moment that sort of one of the central characters sort of dies in his attempt to close the loop.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so you have people having experiences with time, and on some level there was some dimension aspect to it, or some different version aspect to it, but it mostly sort of revolved around time. and this condition with epilepsy and ear bleeding and, tones and things like that. And then you've got these strange trees, which seem to be the area or the zone of the lake where the rift or the anomaly seems most pertinent or most prevalent or whatever it is. The situation here in Austin is this. Lady Bird Lake is one of 7 lakes that are dammed up around the city of Austin. It is the Colorado River in Texas dammed into lakes. So they're man-made lakes, right?
Reservoirs, yeah.
Okay. And since for at this point, 60, 75 years, people have been going missing or dying in somewhat mysterious ways, with clusters happening at certain times and then nothing for quite a long time, right? And you have a scenario where the Austin Police Department is insisting that most of these are accidents and that they're unrelated. They're all accidents and are unrelated. And you have the people of Austin, after all of these years, finally becoming somewhat insistent that there's something else going on here. And there's a lot of narratives around it. There's ideas about like a sort of a theft ring. There's ideas of the smiley face killer. There's ideas of a gay serial killer. There's ideas of, right? But the other thing is that, so Lady Bird Lake used to be called Town Lake. It's about 10 years ago, they officially changed the name. But one of the lore in Texas is always, you can't go swimming in Lady Bird Lake. And there's like a few layers of reasons. So the first layer is that there's some sort of bacteria or algae in the water that's not good for humans, right? And that's why you can't go swimming in the lake. But as soon as you dig through and realize that that's not actually true, the next layer of the cover up is that there's a strong undertow in the water and it's not safe, right? And then you kind of dig past that.
An undertow, right?
Right. You get to this point where you start to recognize that when people go missing in the lake, they don't really put much effort into looking for them, which is weird. And that there are anomalous things that seem to happen on the lake where people seem to lose their orientation, right? I literally watched with my eyes Austin Parks and Rec helicopter go down into the water, like the way we hear that things disappear into the Bermuda Triangle. And the pilot of it was really confused about what happened. He did survive, but he had virtually no memory of it. And I also had this really strange interaction with the gentleman one day. Laura and I were out exercising, and we're running this way, and he's running towards us and passes us. And then a few minutes later, we feel someone coming up behind us, and we look, and it's this guy who had passed us about 5 minutes earlier. And he's getting really close to us, and we could tell that he was wanting to be near us or wanting to talk to us. And he tells us that he's confused, that he had a seizure and fell in the water, and he got out of the water and he's disoriented. And he is soaking wet, so he seems like he's been in the water. And he walks with us for about half an hour, right? And in the beginning, we were a little nervous because we got to this one area right near the power plant where he's walking with us and there's a car blocking the path. And I've never seen that before. And it almost like that car pulled into that spot to it felt like it was there to sort of meet us or intercept us. And so we both got pretty anxious, but we passed it and nothing seemed to happen. And he started talking to us and he started telling me about some specific kind of epilepsy that he has, and that he goes to this doctor, and I remembered the doctor's name, and later I did look her up, and that is a real brain doctor in Austin. But he seemed confused. What he was telling me was that the street that he was looking for didn't look right. So he was saying, I'm looking for like Navasota or whatever. And Navasota is a street in that area of Austin. But he was saying that the thing that's supposed to be, it looked different. Like what he was looking for on that street wasn't there. Right. And he just seemed confused. Like he seemed to like, he didn't seem crazy. He didn't seem to be on drugs. He didn't seem stupid. You know, it seemed like he was perplexed about the version of Austin he found himself in, which was mostly familiar, but missing marker points for him to know like where he would normally turn on the trail and whatnot. He walked with us for about half an hour and then we parted ways. And since then, so it was like 2 years ago, I've talked about it on a show with Michael before. Since then, I have seen him a couple of times around town, and actually not around town. I've always seen him in Whole Foods. I've seen him like 3 times in the same Whole Foods. And every time he looks at me like he knows me, but he can't quite place it, right? And he's always like talking to the cashier or talking to the security guard that stands out front of the market or whatever it is. But he always looks at me in this way like, that's meaningful, right? That is kind of interesting. I've never approached him and talked to him. I'm almost certain he wouldn't remember, right? And so over the time that I've been back here, like I knew that when I used to live here back in the late 90s and early 2000s, that there were stories of people going missing in the lake, but I was still buying the stories about the algae or the undertow or whatever. But with all of the things that I've come to understand about what's really going on in Austin here with technology and lots of other stuff, I think it's possible that the lake is some sort of portal between dimensions or some sort of like timeline. I don't know. Something is happening with the water where people are being attracted to it, or people are recognizing that there's something going on there. I see a lot of homeless people and like graffiti taggers and stuff doing things that seem to me to be like leaving breadcrumbs or hints for themselves about like how to find their way back to something. I see like people pick a spot where they're going to sit. There was a gentleman who was sitting under the bridge on First Street. He didn't move from the same spot for 2 years. That fool didn't go to the bathroom. He peed in his pants. He wasn't on drugs. He wasn't crazy. He was nice. I brought him food one time, but he always sat there staring in the same direction. There was another older gentleman on the other side of the lake who had a tent that he was living in, and he would stare in the same direction all the time. And then one day he was just gone. The guy that I was talking about that's under the bridge, like finally after 2 years, the police put up notices that if he didn't move, that, you know, or if people didn't move from their spots, they were going to get, be arrested. He was gone. I don't know if he was arrested, but what it always felt like to me, based on the position he was sitting in, what it faced and what was around it, that he was staring at what he knew to be some kind of portal or some kind of rift, and either waiting for it to open again, or like waiting for someone who like he was supposed to be meeting up with, but got lost in the dimension, whatever the fuck it is, right? Like he didn't take his eyes off of this area, right? And some of the people who, there's some through lines with some of the people who have either gone missing or turned up dead. There's even people who like have survived and have some memory of what happened to them or no memory of what happened to them or whatnot. And I've talked about some of this on shows before. It's been a while, so I don't remember all of the details. But all of the places where the people go missing or are found are locations that I have identified as anomalous, that I have had weird things happen to me there, that I have seen weird stuff, that are at the center of like what I call the portion of the lake where I see like the reflective reality. I don't know if I've ever shown you any of the pictures that I take of the lake, where literally there's like a perfectly upside down Austin that you can see in the water that has such an eerie sense of definition to it that I ask myself the question, are we in the real world, or is that the real world? Are there two Austins? Are they connected? Or do some of these buildings go much farther down into the ground? So they're literally like, not just top up, that there's like a full other building underneath the ground down there going the other way. like the anomalies on this lake have made so much content for me over the last couple of years. And it seems to be some kind of like way station or junction between timelines, or between moving back and forth in time, or wrapping around, or dimension. Like maybe there's other versions of Austin, and the lake is like somehow you go in the lake. I've played with the idea that it's bottomless, that right, like that it's like an inland ocean and it's very, very deep. You go in the water and you don't necessarily come out in the same version. There's topography and geology around the lake that there's some areas where it's like tropical, there's palm trees, other areas where it's like you're in the woods, cedar trees, like oak tree, right? Like there's all these different geographies like compressed here, right? So maybe it's kind of an access point to many different times or versions of the same, like times at the location or versions of the location. And then of course there's the movie The Congress, right? Which is, have you ever seen the movie The Congress?
No.
So it's an Alamo Drafthouse film, which Alamo Drafthouse is an Austin film company and movie theater. Congress is the main street that leads up to the Capitol here in Austin. And in the movie The Congress, there's like this weird underground sort of grotto that these people who have sold their image and likeness sort of to the Hollywood machine go to interact with each other in post having sold their likeness. And it's like this underground, underwater grotto, and it's very bizarre. They also are in this place where you can take a drug to become another person, right? You can like experience what it's like to be someone else and whatnot. And when I look at all of these sewer entrances that I see all around the lake here, like inside, and I haven't built up the courage to go in yet, I feel like there's something under there. Like, I don't know what it is, but I feel like since I've been here, I feel like something is trying to, and I don't know if it's malevolent or benevolent or whatever it is, sort of entice me into going in there and checking it out. Right? And
yeah.
right? Yeah.
So I found this painting. I don't know if it's the Lady Bird Lake, trailside retaining pond, Earth's portal at Lady Bird Lake. It's from an artist.
I never found this one. Okay.
And it's 15 grand. She did it in 2020. Again, I don't know anything else more, but it's interesting that we're filming this the day before Lyndon B. Johnson, which Lyndon B. Johnson is who wife's was Lady Bird, who the lake is named after, right? Lady Bird, First Lady, what's her name? Lady Bird Johnson.
Yep.
And again, we're doing this November 21st.
It always happens, and I have some dates for you for our next segment that it's going to blow your mind too.
So I wondered, like, I was like, Lyndon B. Johnson, why does that sound so familiar? What is he famous for? Of course, he's famous because of JFK, right? He would have never been president if it weren't for JFK being gunned down, right?
Yep.
And so I found this. I don't know if it's got anything to do with it, but you're mentioning portals, and there's also the conspiracy that there are tunnels near the Lady Bird Lake. So
I've been in some of the tunnels, but I haven't been into these like sewers that go right in towards the water.
So Lady Bird Lake, Texas secret tunnels. See what comes up. Mystic that there are secret tunnels for people and horses that extend from the Capitol all the way to Lady Bird Lake. Although tunnels did exist, they were not secret or meant for escape, but rather installed for utility. So of course, right? So it's just utilities. You can't swim in the water because there's a deadly, bacteria in it, right? So that was in 1960s that they ruled that. So it makes you wonder how, for example, at Skinwalker Ranch, right, where you have the Skinwalker kind of sort of they call them the water babies that call people towards bodies of water. And then I believe they also drown. And you're talking about this attraction that people have when it comes to this. And that's why that movie was so important to me, because I'm like, oh, could this be, right? Shamalama Ding Dong, which I'm sure is in the know. He did the movie The Watchers. His daughter did the movie The Watchers, which was kind of sort of about Nephilim, interdimensional portals type of thing. Then you had this movie that he produced, right? He wasn't a director. He was, I think, executive producer. And I'm like, is this another piece to the puzzle of people who have neurological disorders? And why do people get MS? Are they in the wrong timeline? Did they slip through at some point in time or something where we don't know why they have certain thing wrong with them, but they just do, and there's no cure for it? Well, what if it's temporal? Like, what if it's like time diseases is what I called it. I think is dimensional diseases or something or other I called it, where it's like you're in the wrong place. That's why that's happening to you.
Yep.
Right? And
I forget which one it is, but there's a woman named Alethea Black, and she talks about how like one of the neurological disorders is because you're processing time too quickly, and the other one is because you're processing time too slowly. And so, right, what you're talking about, like that would be that. Like if you're, that seemed to be when the time periods would come based on weather and like what was the deciding factor about if the portal was going to open again, right? It was
the water height. If it was a drought or not.
Water. There's on the bridge here, there's a stairway that shows the last time this lake has flooded many times, and the last time was in June 2001. And you see where that mark is, right? Like it's super interesting. Like it's super high, right? And this has happened multiple times. So I also wonder if the water rising and or the water, receding, depending on which dimension you're in or how the story is going, that correlates on some level with these clusters of people either disappearing or dying, being found dead or whatever it is. The other part that's weird about this is there does seem to be some connection to a similar thing that's happening in Chicago, right? And almost like during some time periods where there's not, like, whether it be a few weeks or a few months or a few years, where it's not happening here, it seems to be happening in Chicago. And what I know, I went to Chicago for the first time this past year. The architecture there is fantastic.
Like it?
I did like it.
I like Chicago too.
If they didn't have winter there, then it's a place I'd consider living.
If it wasn't a shithole, I lived there.
Right. So, but not only is the architecture super fantastic in a similar way that I find a lot of the architecture here to be really interesting. Literally, they have some of the exact same buildings built by the same architect, and the difference between the buildings, they're just bigger versions of the one here, but they're farther back from the water. So in order to reflect upside down in the way it does here, they have to be bigger. Now, Chicago's a bigger city. They have a higher skyline, like you can go higher than whatever, but they're also further back. I identified 3 or 4 buildings that are exactly the same proportionally as the ones in Austin. They're just bigger there. Some of them have the exact same name, right? And I'm wondering if you know how to do all this, if it's possible to move around, right, through the water or through the buildings, right? And so we've got somebody who's discovered the multidimensional, omnidirectional space-time reality that we live in, and they're using it to move around and do things in an undetected fashion. And maybe there's a serial killer, or maybe there's other people who are experimenting with the same set of knowledge, but they're not doing it right. They're not making it back in time before the window closes, or they're going back in time and some up and getting themselves in trouble with somebody, or right. If suddenly somebody
like Marty McFly,
right, the wrong timeline, and he was trying to say to you, I'm your brother, or I'm your husband, or I'm your sister, or whatever the fuck it is, and they won't stop bugging you, you might get your head bashed in.
Yeah, and you're crazy, get away from me. What are you talking about? Because that's the automatic, a reaction that you would give somebody like that. And the first thing that you see when you see a homeless person, you go, they don't have their whole thing together, and all that. And an interesting part here, you're talking about skylines. Mm-hmm. And I put here the significance of skylines, And it says here, this is the AI, by the way. Skylines are important for a number of reasons, including economic development. A city skyline can indicate economic development with more compact cities having lower emissions, blah, blah, blah. Societal values. Skylines reflect the society's values as tall buildings convey a sense of importance and prestige. Cultural inheritance. A city skylines can indicate its cultural inheritance, such as the division into residential, commercial, and business districts. Symbol of power. Historically, skylines have been a symbol for power, wealth, and prosperity. Because that's always something that you see, right? Like every single huge city usually is in front of a body of water, which that says a lot because I believe Mark had told me one time there was this book about rivers and how a majority of the population always settle near rivers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Michael Wan has talked about this as well, where it's something about the rivers now. You can interpret that.
It's called Time Rivers by Goro Adachi that has some interesting ideas, right? And Michael, has spoken a lot about sort of the connection between rivers and sort of time and the sort of social engineering of a culture with technology or new ideas or whatnot.
By who, you said?
Time Rivers by Goro Adachi. It's rivers. It's multiple.
Akechi?
Adachi. That's it. The Time Rivers. Yeah.
Goro Adachi. Ooh. Have intelligently designed to function as literal rivers of time. Oh, this is dope. I see. This is what I like. This is the type of stuff.
And I don't think he got it necessarily exactly right, but he's opening up some interesting paths for people to traverse with trying to understand some of this stuff. Something you said once. Oh, Alicia, can I screen share on here?
Yeah.
I actually was out exercising today, and I took some pictures, and I want to show you a few of them, and you can see how portal-like so many places on the water are. How do I do it? Let's see.
It's just like StreamYard. You just click the little screen, and then.
I find StreamYard to be difficult. Let me see.
You use Zoom, don't you?
Photos. Okay, let's see if this is. No, that's not going to be it. Allow. Oh, no, that's not the right thing. Let me see if I can pull it up and then try it. There's that. It closes it when
Goro Adachi. Have you tried getting this guy on? Is he still around?
He's still around, but I don't think he does. I know Michael and Masaki have told me that he doesn't really do it anymore. Unable to share the screen. There's nothing to share. Make sure the browser has a permission to record the screen.
Of course. So this guy's got an interesting website. Check this out.
Yeah, his website is really interesting.
The Super Torch Ritual Underground.
Yep.
Huh.
He made most of his material private a number of years ago, and he does very little publicly anymore at all.
Of course.
Yeah.
Seems like an interesting kind of guy.
He's super interesting, right? I know Randy, my old podcast partner, tried to reach out to him for shows a couple times, but yeah, I think that he was doing it in the early 2000s, but other than that, he's not really interested. Let me grab, since I can't share the screen, let me grab my phone. It's in the other room. I'm going to show you a couple of.
Is it not letting you share the screen, really?
It says that it's like this always happens on everything but Zoom. I can never share anything on any other.
Of course, it's the lizard people.
Select a window or screen. I selected messages because that's where I have my pictures, and I hit allow, and it says unable to share the screen. There's nothing to share. Okay, so let me just grab my phone and I'll just show you that way. I'll be right back.
Of course, it's the Illuminati trying to stop us from sharing anything.
Right.
You can also send. Is it a lot of them? Because you can send them to me and I can pull them up.
Let me just see. It's so slow and laborious to do it that way.
You have WhatsApp?
I do.
Or Telegram? You can send it to there.
I don't have Telegram. Let me just do them.
Get with the times, Emily. You gotta.
I just at a certain point I decided I wasn't signing up for things anymore. Okay, here we go.
And make you bigger. Okay. Oh yeah.
See how it's a perfectly okay. Hold on. This is a bridge, and see how when it reflects in the water, it ends up looking like eyes or a portal, like a Stargate you can go through.
But you can't swim in there.
Correct. Look at the way the buildings are in the water. Look at the way you can see different sort of, look at that.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. That first picture you showed was pretty crazy looking. The first one that you got there.
I'll go back.
Everything is completely still there. That one right there. And what's that building? Isn't that the Rockfin building or something that you told me about?
That's the Google building.
Google.
All right. This building right here is called the North Shore. It's one of the buildings that's also in Chicago. And the owner, the guy from Rockfin, the French guy or whatever, he lives there. Right. Like one of the addresses for Rockfin is in that building. And I watched him on a podcast one time and I could tell he was on the patio of that building. Right. And then you have the Independent, which is like actually you can't see the Independent.
And isn't it called the Fin or something like that? The building?
I don't know exactly what the building is called. It's owned by Google. Right. But there's let's see. There's this interesting building right here that's being built that has this really interesting seam in the middle that almost almost seems like it's trying to show you where the direct center of Austin is, and it's like split in half. And then this building right here, this sort of lower building right here, right? Michael and I, when he was here a few weeks ago, we were doing some research on it, and it's the company is called Silicon Labs. And we found something really interesting. The description of what this company is. Let me tell you what it is. And you're going to be like, wow, that's kind of crazy.
It sounds like some Westworld, Silicon Labs here. I got them pulled up. The IoT development platform, those people?
Yep, right. So Silicon Labs, commonly referred, is a fabless global technology company that designs and manufactures semiconductors, other silicon devices, and software, which it sells to electronic design engineers and manufacturers in Internet of Things infrastructure worldwide.
Internet of Things.
Right. We found some really interesting description of it that's not in this one, where it talks about like the bridge between being a bridge between analog and sort of like digital or Internet of Things type of. Where's that one description? If I find it, I'll send it to you later. Where's that one that had the thing about the analog stuff? Let me see if I can just search the term analog.
So, are you ready for another movie that? Well, I don't want to say it's not as good as Caddo Lake, but there's a movie, right, where of course Nick Cage. It's called Pay the Ghost, and in this movie, spoiler alert, he literally walks on a bridge that connects the living world with the world of the dead, like a physical bridge that he crosses over to go find his missing son that was taken by like a demon or something or other, and goes in there to rescue him. And then he ends up like rescuing all these missing children that had been taken by the spirit in that area, because it was a spirit that was angry at one point because of something that happened. And he literally crosses the bridge to the other dimension and pulls everybody back out, and then they're all reunited with their parents.
Some days it feels like that in Austin. Some days when you cross, there's many bridges that cross the lake all in downtown Austin. There's the Pleasant Valley Bridge. There's I-35 Bridge, Congress Bridge, First Street Bridge, Lamar Bridge, Mopac Bridge. And all these segments of the lake have a uniquely different feel to them. But sometimes when you walk over, you literally feel like you're crossing over some sort of domain into a different domain, right? I found the explanation. It says, Silicon Laboratories is an industry leader in the innovation of high-performance, analog-intensive, mixed-signal ICs, right? So that's right there in that sort of dish, right? Like right there between those buildings. It's very weird, right? Like the way that the lake feels, like when I'm on the trail, it's kind of like a different flavor every day. Like some days that you see Some days everybody's acting weird. Some days everybody's walking with a funny gait. Some days everyone's really attractive. Other days people are all ugly. Sometimes like every child is crying, right? Like it almost seems like a slightly different place every day. And I exercise on the trail almost every day since I've been living here again since 2021, right?
One of the things that interested me, and when was that episode you sent me? When did you record that?
The one that I sent you the other day?
Yeah.
That was probably recorded either early in 2024 or late in 2023.
Okay, no, because you mentioned me in that episode, and you talk about the Pythagorean palace idea, and one of the interesting things, right? Because we mentioned Westworld and this idea of when the main character, I forgot his name, where he doesn't see the door, and that when she said that really like clicked in me, where right that shows you how the system works is only the initiated, and this is directly off of the book Pythagorean Palaces.
Mm-hmm.
Only the initiated know where the secret doors are. So only those that are able to see, the ones that are initiated in the mysteries. Yeah, there you go. That's the book that set all this off. And he's got other great books too, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I have all of them. He's probably one of my favorite authors. And he wrote a lot about he wrote about the homunculus too, and some of in his book Falling in Love with Statues, he writes about Pygmalion and the concept of animating statues and all this other stuff, Frankenstein. And one of the interesting things that she said that really clicked for me was what the character in that show, right, where I forgot at the end of what season, when you start to realize that he's actually one of the robots.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, do you see the door? He's like, what door? So I think that a lot of these places are like that. Like, what if you're not attuned to whatever frequency or whatever it is, or the lake is not at the right level, and it's like, hey, you can't see the doors because you're not there yet, or you're not one of them, whoever them are, or you don't have the correct wiring in your brain, right? So maybe the people who have, like today, I am working on I have an idea for a documentary, and I pulled the police reports of one of the main stories that's cited for the thing that I want to talk about. And they painted it as it was a DUI, and that the guy was screaming about, right, that the boogeyman made him crash. But he was arrested for being under the influence, and the police report and everything, it kind of says like that the police officer smelled like alcohol in his breath, but they never did a breathalyzer on him. It's just going strictly based off of what the police report says. And I mean, let's be real. You can make it say whatever you want. Like if you want to get conspiratorial, you can make anything say whatever you want. Let's call it the powers that be are holding the truth back, and they're making this guy seem crazy, and it could have actually been the boogeyman that made him crash. Just want to remind everyone, make sure to check out the show on Patreon, patreon.com/the One-on-One Podcast. I constantly get emails. Oh, only one episode a week. Yeah, one episode a week for the public, but for as little as $5 a month, you can get up to 2, sometimes 3, sometimes 1 episode per day on the Patreon, as well as on the YouTube channel as a member for as little as $5. And there's also on the Patreon over 250 episodes only found on there. There's an extensive backlog of episodes, so check that out. If for those interested, for those asking, make sure to follow the show on YouTube, One Podcast, also One Media. I am going live every Tuesday on there streaming. I also go live on twitch.tv/One Podcast, so make sure to check me out on there Tuesdays 6 p.m. Eastern, and make sure to get your copy of the Occultus Mundi Homunculus Owner's Manual, all that good stuff at tjojp.com. Can pick up your copies there, or go over to the Ko-Fi. I'm on Facebook, Twitch, Kick, Rumble, all that good stuff. You know where to find it, and enjoy this episode. Or he could have just been drunk, right? And that could have made him crash. But it goes back to this concept of these people in society that we look down on, who maybe have a key to the answer, but they're disregarded because they're too crazy, or their appearance puts you off, or their smell, or whatever it is, right? Because they've been put in that position. Because I've always said that reality is we're all hallucinating together, but we all agree on it. And until one person steps out of that disagrees with, no, my reality isn't that, it's this, this, and this, or I can't remember this city. Why is this city different this time around? What if they're telling the truth? Why, right? What if they're saying something, right? I mean, or let's take it a step above. What if any 3-letter agency could be hitting them with a sort of technology, voice to skull or something or other, to test it out? You don't think that they're every now and again testing some sort of beam out? I mean, they've talked about having the tech to make, when they were at war, make them feel all warm and fuzzy, or make them feel like Allah is talking to them or whatever and telling them to do something. I mean, what a better way. And I think that religion itself, I was talking about hypnotism a little bit ago with Longo, and how I think religion is a form of hypnotism, to put people, it sedates people, and it makes them believe crazy. It makes them believe crazy. You can talk about the homunculus and all that, but then you'll believe, but if your religion says that dragons are real, you'll believe that one book from that one religion because you're part of that religion. What's the difference?
So a couple of things. When we were talking about the doors and not seeing the doors, there's a really, it's like, sounds silly because it's like a kid's movie, but it's actually really good. It's called The Portable Door. That is interesting. And then there's a very famous book that I think I own, but I've never read, called The Doors of Perception, right? And when you were talking, for some reason, that was coming to my mind. And then as far as what you were just saying about whether there really was some kind of entity, or whether someone's up, or whether the CIA is doing weapons, one of the things that I am very certain about that is going on in downtown Austin is that it's become a mixed reality area in downtown Austin, in a certain corridor in the city. Like, it's becoming gamified.
Really
right?
Quickly, Emily, think about what you just said, right? That these large cities are becoming these perhaps testing areas. And is this perhaps why all these cities, they've approved recreational drugs, such as Portland, and they're testing out.
Yes. So this is, okay. So there are certain areas of downtown Austin where I have completely different experiences there when I am on drugs, like mushrooms or something, than I have in other areas when I'm on them, or in a different city or whatever it is. And it's like the same every time in this area of downtown Austin, right? Some of the people don't look real to me. Like, they look like they're not like, okay, so remember like when people were wearing masks, and we were talking about whether like facial recognition software could still tell. I will see people in a nightclub where I can only see the top part of their face, and the lower part of their face is like green screen or black. And it's not all the people. It's just some of the people. It's almost like some of the people are really there and some are not, and they're like not rendering completely. I've talked about this several times on shows. There's like one club in particular that that's like the main theme of every sort of experience that I've had there, is this sort of weird experience with either missing features on people or extra features. Like, you can see someone's like weird troll ears or something like that seems, and I don't have that experience in Los Angeles, or if I go to a different area of Austin and listen to the same kind of music and do the same kind of drugs or whatever it is, right? So yes, microdosing is being encouraged. Like, recreational drugs are being legalized. And also in some of these areas downtowns, there's some weird towers that aren't exactly 5G towers. Like, we don't know what these things are broadcasting. Also, some areas of Austin, and especially in an area where a lot of these people have gone missing, there's those weird purple lights in that corridor of downtown. There are videos of some of the people who eventually ended up going missing and either not being found or being found dead, where you see them walking away from Rainy Street. One of the names that they give the serial killer is the Rainy Street Ripper, right? You see them leaving a bar and walking and seeming like they're talking to someone, but there's no one there. Well, what if they're seeing someone, right? Like, what if they're seeing someone and that someone is luring them towards the lake, either with nefarious intent or they're like just walking with that person, but that person is like either literally not real or sort of like there's a blending of dimension or something like that, right? And, you know, if you go like looking into some of the corporations and, you know, Austin is a place where technology and like militarized operations come together pretty efficiently, right? And, you know, there's theories out there that whoever's doing these killings is like part of some like weird, you know, military cult, or there's all these different theories. But to me, it keeps coming back to the fact that this area of Austin has a natural phenomenon, being either some sort of interdimensional or temporal gate or portal or something, right? And that there is technology at play in downtown Austin that has turned it into, on some level, a gamified environment.
So I was driving on the turnpike the other day with my wife, and we have a lot of those purple lights here in Florida. And the explanation that they gave for it is that there was a defect from the supplier, allegedly. But it's interesting because the color purple is a non-spectral color, and I've done the alchemy of the color purple. You have Hans blue, Hans purple, where I contemplated the concept of perhaps some sort of consciousness transference technology in some sort of way. And what you were saying about the color purple, real quick, about seeing things that aren't there, right? We think about imaginary friends. We think about kids who see things that aren't there because perhaps, right, the concept of their skull hasn't united together. You have the trephination and the idea of having more oxygen to your brain. Well, this movie just recently came out, and I've been meaning to see because I believe it's on Netflix, and I wanted to see it with my kids, but my wife was kind of weirded out by it, and she was like, "Oh, why are you gonna watch that with them?" So I never did. But it's Harold and the Purple Crayon. Everything he draws is about to get real, and it's literally about this guy who has a young boy named Harold lives inside a book. His magic purple crayon can make anything come to life, including his friends Moose and Porcupine, who he spends time with. Now an adult, Harold continues to take adventures. One day, the narrator, whom Harold refers to as Old Man, right, almost like this Sky Daddy type of thing, mysteriously disappears. Determined to find him, Harold draws a door to the real world, followed by Moose. In the real world, Harold and a now human Moose look for the old man, whom Harold believes is his father. So, what an interesting concept.
Right. So I think the things that we think people are seeing that aren't really there, I think they're really there. We just can't see them. Yes. Right. And I think that and this is where we start to cross paths with the way that they've pathologized this skill and called it schizophrenia or a neurological disorder. That I see it now at this point as like the entirety of our environment, whatever, if you think we live in under a firmament, if you think space exists, if you think space is fake and gay, whatever it is, the whole area, everything is packed with information. And some of us have different ways of decoding light, like sort of processing light that allow us to see different bands of it. And some of this has to do with our eyes, and some of it has to do with our metabolism and our genetics, all different kinds of things. But the environment is literally packed with information, and we are tuned into very thin bands of it. Some people have a more flexible range. Some people can keep track of all of that, and others don't, or aren't able to. And the ones that don't seem to be able to prioritize the sort of things into the proper dimensional order get called schizophrenic or bipolar or whatever it is, right? But you said Hans blue and Hans purple, right? So literally these pigments, Tyrian blue, right? Amon Hillman calls the drug that people were taking in the Eleusinian mystery the burning purple, right? So this is something that's like being applied to their eyes so that they can see and be regenerated or whatever it is. Some people have this inside their eyes. It's part of the pigmentation. They have something that equals that band. So they're able to see it naturally, and it's called cryptochromes. It's in bird's eyes as well. Don't look, like, just look up cryptochromes in the eye. Like, Allison McDowell sent me an article about birds that use these cryptochromes to locate things, right?
Whoa.
Blue light absorbing proteins in the eye that play a role in circadian rhythm and magnetic field sensing. There's also lipid deposits in the eyes that have a correlation with schizophrenia, and they're unsure whether schizophrenia causes the lipid deposits or whether the lipid deposits, quote, cause schizophrenia. I think it's probably neither. I think they're just related in that the people who have these lipid deposits and these cryptochromes can see the other people can't, but it doesn't mean it's not there, right? And instead of helping these people to be able to differentiate between what everyone else can see and not see versus what all the things you see, they just give them drugs and send them to a mental institution and whatever it is. But the things they're seeing are consistent and they're talking about the same all the time. They're not like telling one story one day and a different story another day. Like, you have these people that, like, I mean, have you ever listened to like some of the people that we call crazy and what they're talking about? They're talking about the same you and I are talking about it. They're just doing it on the street corner and yelling it at the top of their lungs, and we're doing it on Patreon for $5 a month. It's true.
We're the same. Yeah.
So, okay, but these, like, we process light differently based on what is inside of our eyes, or maybe this gets into pineal gland and there being like a crystal in there, or some sort of, optical device type of thing in there. This also gets into, like, weirdly, like, metabolism and the way your organs process information and nutrients and minerals and all kinds of weird stuff. But what layers of the code you're able to see or to make sense of seem to be correlated to these ideas right here. There is one place in Austin that has those purple lights, and it's right in the corridor where the most amount of the people have gone missing.
So if we go back and look at the etymology of schizophrenia, it's literally a splitting of the mind from German schizophrenie, or coined by Swiss psychiatrist Eugene Buehler, right? Buehler, yeah.
Right? Yeah, Buehler.
From Latinized form of Greek schizien, to split. So it's literally heart and mind, heart, mind.
Right.
So literally schizoid, resembling schizophrenia, but less severe, from 1925. And then it comes here. So you're literally right. So you're speaking about the eye, which I never heard about this before. So, I mean, use your imagination when it comes to any of this. Sometimes seeing is not always believing, but sometimes it is, right? I mean, that's the thing, because when you speak about any conspiracy or anything, it's like, oh, what will it take for you to believe? It's like, I got to see it myself. Well, but then when you get it on video or something nowadays, they'll be like, oh, that's a deep fake or something or other. That can't be trusted, right?
So maybe this is a good place to pivot into what else we're going to talk about, which is, some of your idea about the Imaginal theater and whatnot. When I was listening to your video, you brought up something called a perspective glass, right? That you had these guys who were trying to use this perspective glass or a perspective lens, right, in order to more accurately reconstruct or rediagram the globe theater, right?
Yeah, the most famous theater and speaking of William Shakespeare, because this kind of ties into this phrase, kind of takes on a different meaning when we're talking about all this stuff, right? To be or not to be, and right, Hamlet contemplates death, and I think, right, how that links into all the stuff that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Right. Where, and I'm not saying do any of this stuff just for the sake of conversation, right? Some people feel out of place, blah, blah, blah. I could, I'm just thinking outside the box when it comes to this sort of thing, but to be or not to be takes on a whole different meaning for me. And it has to do with, right, William Shakespeare and the Globe Theater, one of the most famous theaters. But hey, there's one caveat. We don't have any of the drawings. We don't have any of the records. And we've guessed as to what it looked like based on 2 drawings of skylines.
Okay.
Based on 2 different drawings of skylines, they have reconstructed the Globe Theater, which we don't know if it ever existed. And I did contemplate. I said, hey, I actually got a comment about this recently. I think it was today. I'm going to look at it now, where I was like, and that's when I presented the aspect of it being imaginal and not ever really being real. And what if it was, because it's just so bizarre what they were doing. They were having like these battles because they were doing private plays behind closed doors. Who were they doing the plays for? Why were they battling each other as to who could build the biggest theater, the baddest theater, the XYZ? And in Pythagorean palaces, right, it's a war of the homunculi, because the badder your building, the more doors or the more windows or the more rooms or the more whatever showed your power. Right, that the buildings were their homunculi. I mean, that's history. They called it their homunculi. So they have these, in my opinion, these supernatural. And if you think of what do they call them, thespians, and all this community. So let me read the comment that I got, because it plays directly into this here of what we're talking about. Let me see if I can find it. Anyways, continue, and I'll find it here.
Okay, so around the time you were talking about that in your video, though, you also brought up these perspective glasses, right? Like, what if they were using these glasses to sort of either peer into another version of the same place, maybe at a different time or on a different dimension, or to look at, to intentionally offer a different perspective? Like, when you see in those glasses, they're like red, orange, they come a whole set of different colors. And with each one, you can see sort of different features of the environment are more highlighted. Some people like wear those red goggles to look for UFOs or whatever it is, right? You can see things with certain lenses that you can't see with other lenses. It's true about cameras, right? So when they were talking about this device, this perspective glass that they were using to do this, like, it would be really interesting if some people's eyes do that naturally, or if you can train your eyes to do that. Of course, there's always devices. I'm going to offer you a little tease here of, where I'm going to be going with the great work I told you about. But I'm going to be taking a look at the sub-projects of MK Ultra, the 149 known ones with documents, from a completely different perspective, like just completely back away from all the stories we already know about it and go into it with like, what else could be true about the same sets of information, right? And one of the things that I discovered one day as I've been prepping myself for this and whatnot, and I was actually just looking at it again yesterday, so I remembered the exact same term here. One of the projects, listen to this. Tell me what this sounds like.
By the way, the comment is gone. So,
okay. Services related to certain physical studies, which are required to develop effective materials which will influence the central nervous system. The project also supported studies on the optical rotary power of solid and liquid crystals.
What?
Sounds like they were trying to build some sort of perspective glass.
Like the Dark Crystal movie. You ever seen that movie?
I haven't seen that movie, but a lot of people bring it up all the time.
I think it was purple too, if I'm not mistaken.
Right? I don't know. Like, I spent a lot of time looking into sonics and optics and sound and light and all of this kind of stuff. And there's all kinds of weird lenses and crystals and optical devices and things like that. There you go.
Because I think Netflix just did a revamp of this one recently.
Interesting.
And yeah, interesting movie, right? And it's got that purplish glow. It's got like the weird looking,
just like the burning purple.
Exactly. So I think that the purple is it's a key to, right, the purple portal. So yeah, the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. Look at that. Look, it's all purple looking.
Yep.
Here.
Yep.
And you got the architecture too, which plays a role into that. And I think, right, that so it was by Netflix. Yeah. The concept of like, whenever you'd hear H.P. Lovecraft talk about non-Euclidean architecture.
Right.
And whenever I think of like non-Euclidean architecture, I think of like these alien worlds of some sort, right? Because he he's speaking of like, oh, I see this angle that's obtuse but not quite, and an acute angle that's not quite there, and it feels like it's like Inception. It's all moving together. And I recently had a dream where in the dream I was told that when you read something, it changes. And in this dream, I read, so I was on, it was weird. I was on, like Fun Spot, where you have like the kids go-karts that are on a track. They can't get off the track and they're just like kind of slamming. Yeah. So it was like kind of like that, but we were on like these little four-wheelers. And I was on the four-wheeler, and on the four-wheel, like any ATV, there's usually a sticker on there that says like no off-road or anything, like you can't operate this on a public way. And in this dream, I remember looking down at the side of it, and I saw the sticker where it said limited to 15 miles per hour. 1 second. And then when I read it again, because I found myself like, oh, I'm reading in my dream. Like I was like, I got to read it again. When I went to go read it again, it looked like Mandalorian, like kind of Enochian type of way. Like it shifted in front. It was like liquid in front of me, and it changed, and I couldn't read it again. And it reminds me of like that one time that I was on mushrooms, and my keyboard, when I looked down at my keyboard, number one, I had 6 fingers in each hand. So every time I would look at my hand, I'd see a 6th finger, and I'd be like, what's going on? I was freaking out. And I would look at my keyboard, and my keyboard was endless. Like my keyboard, every time I looked at it, it's like it was like I was zooming in, and I could look all the way this way, and it was all keys. And then I would freak out, go back. And then as soon as I would look at it again, I'd kind of zoom in and look all the way that way. And my keyboard was endless, and all the keys were like alien, like they were like, Promethean, the Prometheus alien movie, where it's like all this weird symbols. It was like that for me. And I was freaking out. I was like, what is all this? Like I couldn't figure it out.
All right. A couple of things that this is making me think about. So first of all, you said you saw like a 6th finger. This is when you were on mushrooms, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was telling you about that club where when I go there and I'm on mushrooms, like I see extra features on people, like people, right? So that sounds kind of like that. And then your extra sort of keyboard and the fact that it's like endlessly long, I think is, sort of some kind of idea that like that there, and you said that something about it being Enochian. Well, Enochian chess is when you take the game off the board. So when the music continues past the normal keys, or when the characters are past the normal keys, right? It's like taking everything out of the confined space you normally do that in and move it over. The other thing I'm thinking about is when you, there's a book called The Keys of Enoch. I don't know if you've ever read it.
Probably.
It's an interesting book. It proposes some interesting ideas. But my friend Danny Goler, who we talked about when you were on my show a few weeks ago, the guy with the DMT and the laser, right? The way he describes the code is not completely unlike that, right? And I think that, he's basically saying you put a small dose of DMT and you shine this red diffracted laser at a surface and you will see this code. Well, what would happen if you did a different dose or a different drug, or you used a different kind of light or a different kind of optical device? Yeah. Would you see like another version, like whatever that code says, whatever those codes mean, would you see the thing that it means? Like if the code says the dog is brown, would you see a brown dog there on a different drug or with a different light or whatever it is, right? And this back to what I was telling you about everything being full of information, and it's just, are we able to see it? And if we see it, what are we perceiving it as, right? Did you watch that movie, the chess movie, The Queen's Gambit?
Yeah, where she could see, the series where she
Right.
could see on the ceiling. She
Right.
was taking, what is it, Adderall or something? She was taking something.
She was taking her game off of the board and into her real life, which is what Enochian chess actually is,
Mhm.
right? And she was using this ability for her to externalize this sort of mental game of chess to help her figure out ways to like strategize with extra space and room and then bring that back into her game.
That's
right?
the imaginal theater. That's that's the memory theater where you use it to train. You use it as a form of mental. It's a mental gym, essentially, is
Yep.
what it is. And I think that has a lot to do with the mysteries, and that kind of sort of hints at the mysteries, right? Because chess is the black and white. It's the the Game of Thrones, if you will, where you're going back and forth. And I think that right when you enter Enochian chess, it's been described as that when you play Enochian chess, if you stare at the board for too long, that you will start to hallucinate. You will start to see things that aren't there. And
Yeah.
I think it was Mathers, the ones that played it, where he would play with a specter or a ghost. That was his partner.
Have you ever, it works, you can do it not in the water, but it works better like in the hot bath or the hot shower or the jacuzzi.
I don't bathe.
Rubbed your eyes hard and then watched visuals on the back of your eyes?
My wife hates it because I always rub my eyes really hard and it makes like this squishing sound. And
Right.
she hates that I do that. But yeah, you can rub your eyes and see another dimension.
Right? Okay. So for me, it always is a checkerboard floor, and then it goes into the most saturated psychedelic color visions of like other stuff, right? There's actually some people I go here at parties, like a group, they're called like, it's like a group of DJs, they call themselves Desert Hearts, but all of their flyers look exactly like the shit I see when I rub the back of my eyes if I'm in hot water, especially. Right, so they know about it too, right? And they're just good at creating the graphic designs for that kind of thing. But there's something about there's the dark, like there's the color spectrum from the like dark mode, and there's the color spectrum from the light mode, and it sort of renders the colors slightly differently, right? Sometimes when I eat mushrooms and I close my eyes, I'm getting like light mode, which is like white with saturated colors on it, and other times I get dark mode, so black with saturated colors on it. And the trips have distinctly different sort of feelings and vibes to them based upon whether it's in black mode or light mode, right?
So I have something for you, and it's relevant because you mentioned the Matrix, and the numbers never lie, Emily. And the Matrix equals 31 in gematria. And listen. So the Matrix equals 31. And the numbers never lie, because you know what also equals 31? Fake and gay also equals 31.
Oh,
Therefore,
bam, snap.
the Matrix is fake and gay. So again, that's just what the numbers say. I'm not making this up. You got to listen to the numbers. The numbers never lie. But yeah, no, I think that there is something to even rubbing your own eyes to see this other realm. I mean, what that could have been and doctors always tell you not to do that, right? They tell you like, oh, that's bad for your eyes. You could permanently damage your eyes. Maybe you can, like, who knows? Maybe you can damage the ducts and all of it. But usually the stuff they tell you not to do, it's for a reason. Now, I'm not saying rub your eyes violently to enter another dimension. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying, like, similar to how they're talking about Lady Bird Lake. Hey, you can't go swimming in there, since the 1960s because there's a deadly bacteria. But you can go paddleboarding on Lady Bird Lake.
Right.
What difference does it make?
Well, and also, like, you fall in and you get back up on your paddleboard, and you don't go home with the deadly bacteria, right? So, I mean, yeah, the whole thing is crazy. Because I know you have a tight timing, I want to talk a little bit about this Imaginal theater and the Globe theater and the memory palace aspect of it and all this kind of stuff. Okay, so first of all, my birthday is the same day that the original Globe theater burned, right? And it was weird. Today I was having Zoom chat with Allison McDowell. I don't know if you know who she is.
I've heard that name before.
Yeah, she's a researcher and whatnot. We were just having a friends chat. We weren't doing a show. And I was telling her about what you and I were going to talk about a little bit tonight, right? And within the same conversation, she brings up someone who is sort of tangentially related to what you and I are talking about, but from a completely different perspective, which is hers. And his birthday is also June 29th, right? So I'm coming on here with you. We discover that the original Globe Theater burned on June 29th. Someone she's bringing up is central to the story. She was trying to tell me their birthday is also June 29th. And it was a similar kind of thing she and I were getting into. But I don't think...
Let me add one more in there, because William Shakespeare died on April 23rd, which is also my birthday.
Oh, fuck, dude.
And the Caddo Lake episode, one of the dates of that I pulled up on it was... One of the dates I think was like my birthday, and then the other date I think that the person died was the birthday of my co-host on that episode. So it was like we had like a double boom boom. He's like, "That's my birthday," and I'm like, this is my birthday, so I thought this was weird. He's like, "Well, the other day is my birthday," so we had like a weird like synchronicity there. But yeah.
Okay, so I don't think the Globe Theater ever existed in the way people think of theaters existing. I think the Globe Theater is a congregation that meets outside of the normal rules of space and time as the average person understands them. And it is has to do with geometry. It has to do with sound. It has to do with perspective. It has to do with the elements. And it has to do with the archetypical nature of the characters of the play. And this still happens, right? And there's other ways to achieve this. And I think some of the experiences that I've been having at parties since about the mid-2000s, maybe before that, but I didn't notice it before. I didn't have the eyes to see, right? Is something like this. Like, this doesn't happen at every party, right? But it's happened enough times that, like, I will be at the party. It has to be a really good sound system, right? It has to be a fairly specific kind of music and environment. I have to be in a specific sort of state and mind and condition. And something will happen where, like, I end up in this same place that I've been in this place dating back to 2008 about, where it seems like I am kind of, it's not like I travel, like I feel like I go somewhere. It's like suddenly the room becomes something else. And, it's maybe like either a different set of people are kind of there, or I can see the people that are there in a different light. Like they look like someone else. And all the people they look like are what we would consider archetypes, right? And I've been seeing some of these same people in this place for more than 10, 12, 14 years now when I go to parties. And but there's this feeling to it that never changes, right? Like it feels exactly the same. Like it happened to me at the party where I saw the glowing thing that I told you for a little bit. And it hadn't really happened to me in that way in a long enough time that I thought like whatever that was over. But like the way that it happened, it was like I was right back to that thing that I thought was never going to happen again. And all the same things that ever happened there were happening again, right? And when I'm in that space, I see people who are like, I'm trying to make sure I describe it in a way that I actually mean, that are like, they look like famous people. And part of the reason we have that famous people are famous is because they're archetypical in their nature. Like they bring up certain like feelings in people. They look like someone from history. Oftentimes they'll look like whether it was a real or fabled god or character from sort of ancient history or antiquity or whatever it is. And sometimes I really think I'm looking at the famous person, or I'm recognizing that somebody looks like a famous person and I had never noticed that about them before. But once I see it in that space, then when I see them in the regular world, if I like, oh yeah, I can see now. There's something archetypical in them that I had not noticed. And when I saw them sort of in that space, that part of their character sort of came out. And I think it has to do with cymatics, right? This never happens to me at parties that have a less than adequate sound system, right? Obviously, most of the buildings that I'm going to parties in, though not all of them, I've been to some parties in really interesting buildings. They're just like warehouses. They're just plain boxes. But if I look at the ceiling sometimes, or if I look at the scaffolding that the rigs for the lighting and the lasers and the optical shows and stuff, the scaffolding is in the kind of geometric design and proportions that would be equal to some of the architecture. And this is just about sort of marking out proportion, right? Some of these lighting shows are pretty interesting in the technology that's being displayed and the ways it can make certain things look, right? I'm sure that I'm sure this happens with music, with acting, probably with comedy. I'm sure there's technological ways of doing it, but I feel like there is this ability to create, just like I was talking about in that show that I sent you, right? You can create a space to meet up outside of time, opening up space outside of linear time.
Atlas Shrugged, yeah.
You can go and you can be there and you can sort of contribute to that ongoing project, whatever that is, whether it's a play, whether it's an art gallery, whether it's a symphony, whether it's a building, right? And this is sort of the nature of all of these complexities or really interesting things that we don't quite seem to understand how it makes sense in the way we perceive space and time now, right? And I think it has to do with vibration and elements, right? And like what you are, what elements, and I'm talking about elements from the periodic table. I'm not really talking about earth, wind, fire, water, or whatever it is, right? And what shapes these things make, what archetypes they're associated with, how they adhere when they're being vibrated into place, and what causes them to sort of then, what makes them materialize and dematerialize. I think there are temporary vibrational realities that materialize and dematerialize. And more people are figuring out how to do this, right? People are using different techniques, some of them spiritual, some of them metaphysical, some of them mathematical, some of them technological, some of them scientific, right? All this kind of stuff. And this is, part of why we're experiencing some of the chaos we are, and also what all of the secrecy is about. The secrecy and the weird stuff that, the circus show that they give us is to keep us focused on the sort of linear 3D reality and not paying attention to the Swiss cheese that's all around us.
And speaking of Atlas Shrugged, I guess I haven't been able to confirm this, but Elon Musk said, very appealing if you're a sophomore in college. It's a counterpoint to communism and useful as such, but should be tempered with kindness. And 20 books Tesla CEO Elon Musk wants you to read. And of course, this was November 19, 2022. But you're absolutely right. I think that there is something to like the white brotherhood type of thing. Where it's like these people, again, the initiated that know how to get there will meet up, and it's almost like the Bilderberg or whatever they call it, where but it's like a more esoteric version of that, where they're not meeting on this plane of existence.
It's multidimensional and omnidirectional, how you can access it. I also think that there's like a secret society that's called something like the Secret Spectral Order or something like that. That I'm pretty sure I've heard of something like that. Brotherhood of the Spectral Order or something. I've heard of it a couple of times in the last year. I haven't had a chance to dig into it. I could be combining two separate ideas. If I'm doing that, I'm not doing it intentionally.
The Spectral Order Organization in Luxembourg, is that? No, I think that's from a book. Yeah, I think that's from a book. Yeah, it's from a book.
Spectral order is the lights in the family of deviated rays that emerge after diffraction at the grading exhibit pronounced maxima along well-defined and innumerable directions on each side of an undeviated beam. The integers that distinguish these directions mark the so-called spectral order. That sounds a lot like what we've been talking about here tonight.
I'm about to say something crazy.
Say something crazy.
So, because this came up on my timeline today, and for a second, even though atomic bomb equals 31 as well. Check this out, because this is really interesting, because you're talking about stepping into other realms, how to step into other realms, technology to step into other realms, 3-letter agencies or governmental entities using experimental technologies on unwilling participants to achieve an end goal of some sort, right? What if, for 1 second, all right, check this out, because I found this really interesting. It's gonna be crazy. I know it's gonna sound ridiculous. Like it's.
I specialize in ridiculous. So lay it on.
This is gonna be kind of retarded. I'm just gonna say this right now, okay? But check this out, because one of the interesting things that I saw were paintings that the atomic bombs survivors had painted. Okay.
Yeah.
And some of the drawings are otherworldly. So. Yeah. I speculated that what if, okay, for 1 second, right? What if the atomic bomb isn't what they've told us? We've gone down that rabbit hole, or the nuclear bomb, or whatever it is. But what if these people were susceptible to some sort of interdimensional technology that right? So flash at the instant, I saw a light like a rainbow. This is August 6th, 1945, age 20 at the time of bombing, 49 at the age of drawing. And it's very dark, some of these drawings, right? They're talking about a mother finding, as there were maggots on her face, finding a place to bury her dead baby on her back, right? She had to go somewhere. She was trying to cremate it, and she had to go very far to find would. But I thought for myself for 1 second, these people were seeing things out of this world.
Yep.
What if, again, this is something that happened?
Well, I think that's exactly right, Juan.
And if you think about it really quickly, if you think about it, how Japan is kind of, grown men liking Hello Kitty, very
Murakami, yeah.
And I'm not saying this in a bad way, but very feminine in some sort of way, right? Like, you don't really think Japanese people, and I know this because my wife is half Japanese. Japanese people are very people pleasers, right? They kind of, and I don't want to say this in any sort of bad way, but they kind of don't have they don't stand up for themselves, right? Like, they're very like, oh, okay, I'm sorry, very gentle, very quiet people. And again, my wife's half Japanese, and her family is full-blown Japanese. Like, her uncle's like Mr. Miyagi, like full-blown, like,
wax on, wax off.
Wax on, wax off. But I thought for 1 second right here, 3 days later, the burned bodies in the fire cistern had turned red like demons. I instinctively turned away. And I'm like, what if this is like Doom, right? Where they open up a portal and all the demons come pouring in.
Yep. I mean, I think that is definitely, to the extent, like, we're not making any claims about the existence or danger or whatever of any of these things, right? But I think that everything around the concept of sort of atomic or nuclear power has a lot to do with the different worlds, the different realities, and blending them or blowing them apart. When I say blowing them apart, I don't necessarily mean literally with the bomb, but like, you have a world, and if you separate it into like fractals, right? Or if you have many worlds and you join them into one, right? I think it's really about something, like that. And so what you were talking in your video about the battles between, we're going to build the biggest building, the baddest building, we're going to do a better play, our play's going to be better than yours, our players, our actors, or whatever it is, right? And they each have, it's like the different theater groups are kind of like the different cults, that existed in antiquity, or in my case, like the different groups that throw parties. There's all of these different collectives that throw parties, and each one have their own sort of style, their own sound, their own aesthetic, right? They're all operating, mostly I go to parties in Los Angeles at this point, right? But sometimes they come together and they do like a project together, and there's like a blending of this, right? And it's like a celebration. And one of these parties in Los Angeles that brings a bunch of groups together is literally called Reform. Like, we are reforming the theater, or reforming the cult, or we are reforming the group, or we are reforming the religion, or the rite, the ceremony, the ritual, or whatever it is, right? Let me see if this works to show you a regular screen on my computer, because I want to show you the
They don't want us to know the truth, so it's probably not going to work.
I know. All right, let's see.
But yeah, I mean, again, this is like way out of the box. But when I was looking at that today and reading the descriptions, I'm like, this is like Dante's Inferno, the way that these people are describing this, the rivers of blood and all this other stuff. And it's like, I wasn't there to experience that. And a lot of the people did perish from the thing that happened. So how would we really know what happened truly, right? And it could have been some sort of, they said it was one thing and it could have been something completely different.
So weird. Unable to see that, saying there's nothing it's showing it to me. And then it's saying that same to me. Try one more time. Select the window or screen. I'm selecting the one I want. Clicking on it. Oh, mute website. No, not. I'm hitting allow. It's your dumb platform. Okay.
Apologize.
No worries. The sigil, the symbol for this event called Reform, which they have something that hangs from behind the stage during the show that is this, it's like a sculpture of this shape, right? It's the idol or the icon or the sigil or whatever. No, type in Reform Parties Los Angeles. Oh, there it is, right? Hold on, drop down, go to the one, right? It's like red and black, and there's like a white circle. It's in the left-hand side, right there. Okay, see this weird red thing with the geometry in it?
Yeah.
That's there, and you can see there's another one that's green and white. They do different parties. They have something hanging behind the stage that is that, right there you go, the Reform. You can just see this, not that one, but that looks like scaffolding in a building. Go to just that black and white one that says Reform. It's just literally the symbol in the word. No, go down from where that thing is that you were on, the picture you're on that says Necto. Roll down, there's white, there you go. Okay. They have something that hangs behind the stage that's
alchemy right there. Right. Lost events.
Okay. And that hangs behind the DJ. And when the different lasers and stuff hit it, it starts to look like a crystal or a prism or whatever it is, right? But look how it's a circle that also looks kind of like an eye. Mm-hmm. If you did retinal mapping of the eye, it's going to sort of look like that. But that also looks like when you do theater in the round and backstage or the audience is all around the circle that's in the middle, right? So these are all the different groups that are usually in their own, let's just pretend they're like churches or whatever it is, or their own temples. When they come together, they put them all together into this kind of thing and create like this, this was a party that I was at the last time I was in Los Angeles, where I had this kind of experience that I hadn't had in a while. When I think about it, like from the early days of techno in Los Angeles, a lot of those people had broken into separate groups, and I saw a lot of those people on that night. They had come back together. They had reformed the church or the theater group or the collective or whatever it is, right? And, there was a lot of very... there's stuff that if I look at it through like the lens of some things I've been learning about antiquity from Amon Hillman and Gnostic Informant and things like that, it looks like a modern day version of some of these celebrations and rituals that they used to do, right? I can see things that they're talking about. Like I thought they were kind of something else because I was coming from the perception of the reality that I live in, but why do they look exactly like the things that they're describing from antiquity? Like even the equipment, the scaffolding, the lighting, the sound equipment, the speakers have like parts of them that literally look like the symbols of some of these cults and the religious icons and idols and whatever it is. I'm like, this is the right here, right? All of these sort of temporal or dimensional vibrationally adherent realities that form and reform and come apart and whatever, they're being held together through sound and light. It's on some level like a combination between altering your consciousness and an optical and audio illusion.
And how do we know for a fact that these things aren't real, the things that they're showing up on the screen?
Correct. Yeah, if you look those parties are called Afterlife that use those that kind of visual show, right? There's all kinds of interesting visual shows that different styles of music and different groups at parties are doing. Some of them I find to be really disturbing and others I find to be really cool. And a lot of them are somewhere in between.
Look at that.
Yeah. If you look up like afterlife party visuals, like you'll get like the most amounts of, like the one group that really is into like melodic techno.
And it makes me think of
really the techno, but yeah, the late night.
A movie that really, like, as a kid messed me up and I couldn't sleep for like a week was Blade.
Mm-hmm.
And right, the scene, the nightclub scene where everyone, how you're saying, like they look different, they look off, and then boom, it turns out that they're actually the vampires in there.
I have been to parties, like the parties that I most prefer have like when I get into that space, it's like a very cool sort of futuristic, geometric,
look at this, what
highly saturated color reality. But I have heard people who say that they have the same experience and they end up with people in bloodbaths and vampire. That's not really the context of my sort of mind or whatever. I've had a few scary experiences during my like really bad meth addicted days where I ended up in some situations at parties like in an interdimensional way that wasn't what I would prefer, but it felt much more related to like meth use than it did to anything else. It felt like that's the level of that I was vibrating at. That was the dimension that I was vibrating with. And so that's where I ended up. Right. But,
whoa.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these are wild,
right? There's all kinds of interesting visual shows that are created through different kinds of effects. And some of them are really something to look at the front of the room, and others are dispersed throughout the room and are intended to create almost like a double slit experience or a hypercube type of experience where like you feel like you are inside of something. I've shown you that hypercube box before. I think I've been in parties where you feel like you're inside of that, right?
Inside the Cube, which is part of Charles Hinton. Where he talked about meditating upon the cubes and you could enter another dimension, essentially. So think about this. Like, I think that some of these things might be real, right? They talk. Everyone likes to talk about Project Bluebeam and everything, and I think they've already been testing this stuff out.
Well, if they weren't real to start, they're real now because they've done this enough and they've had enough attention focused on them, right? Like these are like egregores of attention kind of thing, right? That they come to life. I'm sure some people at this party have had that follow them home and their dreams and their nightmares and like that. I'm sure. But you have to be very conscientious. Like I encourage people to have these anomalous edge experiences, but I also encourage people to be very conscious and conscientious about how they have them, who they have them with, where they have them, why they have them, when they have them, and what they do with the information after they have them. And it's something I've had to develop a level of discernment and get better at over time, right? And, I'm not immune to having, a weird experience that I don't like, right? Like, but I figure I usually have whatever experience I need to have. And then it's just learning to work with it and manage it and whatnot. But it's because of the sound and the light, dude. It's because of the sound and the light and the state that you are in when your consciousness meets that stimulation that sort of determines where you go, how you get there, and what you find, and then what you do with it afterwards.
As the famous Nikola Tesla said, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And I think that all the stuff that we've talked about today kind of sort of hints at that, right? That we are all vibrating at a different frequency. We're all water, essentially. We're all molecules that can be reconfigured. We know all of that. What if, this atomic technology kind of sort of does that? And how in any famous movie, I'm sure that there's been movies where when the person teleports, they become a splatter on the wall or something like that. Like, again, just thinking about that and all the things that we've covered today. I'm left with more questions than answers, but you have any final thoughts, Emily, you want to add before we get out of here?
No, that's good, dude. Like, take your pick. Like, of the shows that I might like to talk about with you, like OA is the one that people are bringing up from before, but I also really love any excuse to talk about the series Dark. It's a German series, but it's voiced over in English at this point on Netflix, so you don't have to understand German. And I also really like the Apple series Dark Matter. And it displays a lot of technologies that are sort of a similar or reverse engineering of some of the experiences I've had with Sound and Light parties. So if you would like to watch any one of those series, I would love to engage those topics with you next time.
Have you ever heard, I was put on this one recently. Have you ever heard of the show? Here, let me find it here. Show. The guy from Lost, he's doing a show called From. Have you ever heard of that show?
Somebody just sent me that trailer the other day.
We should do that, but we have to include Ryder Lee because he's the one that showed me that. And
all right, good. I've never met him. We can do a threesome.
Okay, cool. We'll do that next. We'll watch that because he said it's crazy. He said he's past the first season and he's still trying to figure out what's going on, but it's awesome. So From, I'll send you a link for that. And yeah, Emily, where can people find you? Where can they find your show?
Emily Moyer on YouTube, and then I'm on Patreon, Rockfin, Locals. You search my name, you'll find it. Thank you for having me as always, Juan. And I got one thing to say to you when we're off the recording, and then we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, and for $5 a month, you can listen to me rant schizophrenic rants over on patreon.com/the Podcast, www.tjojp.com. Make sure to sign up for the emailing list, Homunculus Owner's Manual, all that good stuff, YouTube membership. If you're listening to this on the RSS feed, make sure to go check out the YouTube. Make sure to go follow me on X. I did go live there with Mark a couple weeks ago. It was too hot for YouTube, so you're going to have to check it out on there. And as always, everyone, catch you on the next one. Stay safe. Love each other, and bye-bye.